Hello, my name is Tiffany Furterer, and this is DigiChef. Have you ever tried to find a recipe online for something to cook and played the scrolling game to get through all the internet ads and descriptions? Well, DigiChef is a website to help you find what you would like to cook and publish your recipes in a simple and effective way. DigiChef's goal is for its users to discover new recipes without the extra filler. This program is created with React and Material UI, using components to manage their own state and pass data to the backend seamlessly. Material UI helps create styled, responsive website designs for the fast-paced development environment. The home page grabs the user in and offers a few recipes to entice the user. All right, let's get started. React Hook forms have supplemented the form process to verify information on the front end efficiently and send to the back end. Users can create accounts, which are stored in the database, and sign in and sign out with the correct credentials. Each input must be filled out correctly to allow the user to move on to the next step. As you can see here, once we create an account or sign in, I can easily sign out, directing me back to the sign in page. The Create Recipe form. A feature offered to members of DigiChef would be to create their own recipes and publish on the website. There are some restrictions that include a maximum character description size that align with the values and goals of DigiChef. A user can add and delete steps and ingredients easily. All right, individual recipes. Recipes have their own individual pages. When viewing a recipe, there is an option to write a review. Only accounts that are signed in can write reviews. DigiChef also offers a printer-friendly version of the recipe, modified for just the essentials. The most difficult part of this project was probably the React learning curve. React is different as it is component-based, passing info into the different sections to create different results. This creates less redundant code. The most interesting part was the various packages that could be implemented and choosing the right one for the project. For example, there are many packages that help with form verification. Doing some research, React Hook Forms package was chosen because of their use with the nested field arrays, allowing a user to add and delete steps with ease. Lastly, I would like to give a shout out to our mentor for this opportunity. The advice received during this project was crucial to understanding the new concepts and ideas. If I had an issue, I felt no hesitancy to ask my mentor. I also want to thank the other team members for the easy communication and willingness to help out as needed. And finally, thank you Code Day for this opportunity to learn something I wouldn't have gotten the knowledge from my traditional four-year college program.
Hello, I'm Krishnan Shankar, and I'll be presenting the technical aspect of DigiChef. First, I'll go over the design of DigiChef and how everything works. When a user interacts with the site, they interact with the HTML. The HTML uses CSS for styling and React.js for functionality. This comprises the front end of the site, which you saw earlier. The back end comprises of a Django REST Framework API. The React frontend communicates with this API through web requests to receive useful JSON data in return. This is what allows the frontend to authenticate users, access recipes, and more. The API is run on the popular Python web framework Django. All data is stored in the PostgreSQL database. Finally, both the frontend and the backend are run inside a Docker container, hosted on AWS. When just looking at the API, there are three main parts. The PostgreSQL database stores the data in three tables, each interlinked with one another. The Django backend provides the data transfer between the database and the REST API. Finally, Django REST Framework serializes the database results into a usable API and gives it a clean UI. The entire API is hosted using AWS, a reliable cloud hosting platform that will keep the API online 24/7. This is the API frontend, designed using Django REST Framework. It is accessible on a public URL, which means that the data is completely accessible to anyone who wants to use it. This lets people make custom bots, scripts, and other programs to do cool tasks, such as generate a random popular recipe every day. Finally, the API frontend uses a pre-made UI from Django REST Framework to display the JSON data and accept new data as an HTML form. For an overview of what occurs when an action is performed, let's look at one specific action. If a user scrolls through the list of recipes on the site and finds one that they are interested in, this series of events will occur when they click it. First, React will process this click into a web request, which will be sent to the JSON API. In this case, a GET request will be sent to the recipes endpoint to retrieve a specific recipe. Then, Django REST Framework will process this request and use Django's models to communicate with the database. Django will use this information to create an SQL query to retrieve that certain recipe from the database. Django will then send this data back to the REST Framework API. Django REST Framework will now serialize this data into a JSON format to provide back to the React frontend. React will now use this JSON data to populate the HTML page for viewing that specific recipe. This entire process occurs in different ways anytime a button is clicked or a page is loaded. The database layout is pretty simple. The database comprises three tables, all interlinked to one another. The first table stores all the users registered. It includes their username, real name, email, password, country, profile image, and biography. The next table lists all the recipes ever created. The recipes table links to a specific user who created the recipe, and it also stores all recipe-specific information, like ingredients, restrictions, instructions, tags, its title, and description. Finally, reviews are linked to a user who created the review and a recipe which it was created for. It also includes the title, details, and whether the user recommends the recipe. Now we can see how the API actually looks and feels for viewing and data collection and sending. For the demo, the API running on a local server will be used in order to not compromise user data. This is the home page of the API. For deployment reasons, this page must include the current status of the API. As you can see, the API is currently alive. The root of the API is located at /recipe tracker. This is an overview of the API and shows where all the API routes are located. Let's start by looking at one specific API endpoint, the user endpoint. At the top, you can see the request types allowed, the content types, the request status, and some other information. Since Django REST Framework can restrict request types for an endpoint, we can see that the user endpoint only accepts GET and POST requests. This removes the need for a lot of the API documentation present in other APIs. For this demo, I've included some sample data in the database. As you can see, the API serializes the data in the database to a JSON output, which allows the frontend to communicate with the backend. A cool feature of Django REST Framework is the inbuilt post request feature. When I scroll down, you can see the API generating an HTML form that can post to the endpoint, just like a Postman request. The API also has a feature to post raw JSON data. This is how the frontend will be sending data to the backend, such as when a user is created. An important note, however, is that this entire UI is provided by the Django REST Framework for users who are looking straight at the API. The real data that will be received when using a GET request on this endpoint is simply the JSON. Let's look at another API endpoint, the recipe endpoint. This endpoint will be used whenever a recipe is retrieved, added, or modified. Again, you can see the UI generated by the API, including the HTML form. For recipes, ingredients and instructions are stored in PostgreSQL lists, which are unique to Postgres and are not supported by Django REST Framework's UI. We need lists in order to simplify our database structure and allow the user to have a different number of steps or ingredients for different recipes. However, when posting to the API as raw data, the API can convert a JSON list into proper PostgreSQL syntax. This is the actual recipe table in the database. You can see how the serializers manipulate the data and allow conversion between database fields and JSON objects. For example, look at the time and look at how the lists are converted from JSON JavaScript lists to PostgreSQL compatible lists. You might notice that the recipe endpoint has a foreign key. All recipes have a link to a user, the creator of the recipe. If you look at the HTML form, you can see the drop-down that lets you choose a user by ID. I can choose any of the two users currently in the database. The raw data input works like any JSON API and lets you specify the ID of the user when creating a recipe. Finally, you can see a new button on this endpoint called Filters. This button allows you to filter the recipes by title or order them by creation date, which are all commonly used on the front end. Some of the main challenges encountered when developing the API include creating and modifying the serializers to properly serialize the database to JSON and vice versa. Although the serializers can automate a lot of this, there are some validations and other fields that cannot be processed without manual definitions and functions. Another challenge was getting foreign keys and backward references to work correctly. Finally, a huge challenge was getting migrations to apply correctly on the production server. Sometimes when a change in the database model is made, the created migration would not apply. Other times that migration would not be correct, and this would cause some invalid database table errors when accessing the API. I would also love to thank our mentor, Tim Van Cleve, for giving us this opportunity and helping us bring it to completion. He was online whenever we needed it to help us with any issues and answer any questions we had. This project wouldn't be possible without his guidance. Finally, I would love to thank my fellow team members and Code Day in general for helping us learn new concepts and make a successful application in just 6 weeks. We hope you enjoy cooking with DigiChef.